Gamers of the internet, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you like FromSoft. The Souls series is a household name now. There's more copies of Elden Ring out there than there are gallons of water in the ocean. I love the Souls series. I have since I was 16 years old. To me, FromSoft was Dark Souls. But back in the day, before they made the perfect sell of RPGs, From Software made a ton of different games. Among these unknown gems was a series called Armored Core. I never played Armored Core as a kid. I remember seeing copies of Armored Core 5 at GameStop and thinking it had cool box art, but I didn't know anything about the series, so I ignored it. It wasn't until the announcement of Armored Core 6 in 2022 that I paid any attention at all to this IP. I thought I should try to play some of the older games, just to see if this was even my thing. Thanks to Vodividia's video, where he played every Armored Core to date, I learned that a good place to start was with Armored Core 4 Answer. The internet collectively seems to think that's the best one, and it was directed by Miyazaki. That's the Dark Souls guy! So I booted up my totally legal copy of 4 Answer and gave it a shot. It only took playing a single mission for me to realize, okay, this game is special. I could tell instantly. This game was unlike anything I'd ever played, and I loved it. After finishing 4 Answer, the wait before Fires of Rubicon became just as grueling as the wait before Elden Ring. I was hyped to the moon and back. After several long months, Armored Core 6 finally came out, and Armored Core 6 slaps hard enough to cook a raw chicken. The music, the gameplay, the customization, the story. Bro, this game has a real story that's actually in the game. You don't need to be a sticky note glue sniffer like in the Souls games to know what's happening. AC6 just tells you what's going on as you play. It's glorious. However, it's not as if Dark Souls had no impact on AC6. You can feel the past decade of design innovations seep into Armored Core 6's soul. More in-depth boss fights, more nuance in the combat, and more approachable controls. This game is phenomenal. It's so good that I did literally everything you could possibly do. All achievements, all S ranks, and all parts acquired. You might think that after 80 hours I would have had my fill, but I simply cannot consume enough of this magnificent game. I have recently discovered the Armory Mod, which is finally breathing new life for me, but I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. For now, let's discuss things in general. All the jank from the old games is gone. AC6 is incredibly approachable. In some ways, I do think that's a bit of a negative. There's less parts and part categories in this game, which limit your creative juices. Of course, the trade-off is that each individual part is more impactful. It's kind of like the difference in the approach to weapons in Dark Souls and Bloodborne. Even with the limited pool of parts, there's still plenty to experiment and min-max with. I think I easily spent just as much time in the garage as I do playing the missions. This game might even turn me into a cringe car guy.
Here in my garage, just bought this new Lamborghini here.
I get a sense of pride when I cook up a crazy idea for a build, assemble said build, and take it out onto a mission where it wrecks shop. It replaces the sense of accomplishment I would get from doing something like laundry, which is really convenient because I haven't washed my clothes in a year and a half. Even if I couldn't make my own mechs, Armored Core 6 would still be a phenomenal game because of just how much fun the combat is. Of course, it's hard to not have fun while piloting a giant robot, but AC6 squeezes every ounce of potential it possibly can out of this concept. As the protagonist, you're not like other robots. You're an armored core, which means you're fast, mobile, and incredibly deadly. You can equip up to 4 weapons at one time, and you can fire all of them simultaneously. Some weapons, like these miniguns, want to be fired constantly for continuous minor damage. Some weapons, though, deal one instance of massive damage before taking a bit of a breather. All of these weapons change how you interact with the enemies in significant ways. You might equip yourself for an endurance fight, or for a high damage combo burst, for long range poking or close range overwhelming. In my opinion, all of these various playstyles are incredibly fun. I literally can't choose a favorite way to engage with enemies. I love all of it equally. However, there's still a handful of mechanics that every build needs to engage with. Mainly your energy, which lets you fly around like a Gundam, and the enemy ACS load, which might as well be a giant clock, letting the enemy know how much longer they have before getting absolutely fucked. The variety of enemies to fight is actually insane. From trash mobs to real challenges to hard as hell boss fights. This game has every flavor of encounter. The enemy variety, combined with the build variety, is probably the main reason I want to keep playing this game until the heat death of the universe. I feel like I really need to shed some more light on the incredible boss fights introduced in Armored Core 6. Previous games in this series had fights against other ACs, but they played out more like invasions from Dark Souls. Armored Core 6 gives us real fights with movesets, mechanics, and even phases. Naturally, the best music in the game is also found in these boss fights. FromSoft's composers just don't miss. The Balteus theme is probably my favorite track in the game. It's just a shame they chopped off Balteus' balls so unceremoniously. Veterans remember how many hands this guy used to have. Good night, my sweet prince. Other standout fights for me include the sea weapon at the end of Chapter 4, and the final boss in the Siding with Carla ending. That boss just happens to have my second favorite track in the game. It's also a narratively dense fight, complete with combat dialogue. If you've seen my best boss fight in Shadow of the Erdtree video, you know just how much I love narrative fights with dialogue. If you haven't seen that video, give it a watch after this one. It's really good. There will be a link in the description. Finding the perfect combination of weapons and frames to destroy these larger-than-life bosses is so incredibly satisfying. Purchasing every part adds to the sense of accomplishment you feel. Maybe I'm just capitalism-pilled, but I need to buy this generator I'm never going to equip. You don't understand. What if I needed to kill a boss later? I have to buy it now! Unfortunately, as an adult, my brain is rotted. If I don't feel like I'm making progress towards something, I can't enjoy it the same way. Like I said at the start of this video, I did everything you could do in Armored Core 6. All S ranks, purchased every part, earned every achievement. I wasn't ready to stop playing Armored Core, but without anything to work towards, it somehow lost its magic. The game was still fun as fuck to play, but I just couldn't have fun for fun's sake anymore. My childhood is gone. As unwilling as I was to say goodbye, I had to stop playing Armored Core. The real reason for my unenthusiastic feelings while playing Armored Core 6 post-completion is lost on even me. I mean, I just spent who even knows how long singing this game's praises. You'd think a game this good could be played forever. Hell, I want to play it forever. But doing so just feels empty now. I'm sure there's something to process and learn here. Something for me to work through that would give me a better understanding of myself and make me a better, stronger, and more complete person. I could then pass this introspection on to you, so that we could all learn something about media and why we enjoy it. But why would I do that when I can shallowly claw on to the highs of my past? The Armory Mod introduces a metric fuckton of new parts to acquire. It also forces you to start a new game from scratch, so you can enjoy the feeling of progressing all over again. The added parts naturally add a lot more build variety, including entirely new possible playstyles. I've had a ton of fun being a parasitic leech with an AP regen build. I've also enjoyed taking advantage of this mod's new status effects. If you're a fan of inflicting the ick upon your foes, you can use corrosion to slowly poison your way to victory. You can apply damage and defense debuffs to opponents. You can build up helpful effects on yourself, or use souped up versions of the base game effects. If you're like me, all these options will probably inflict an IRL debuff upon you. Paralysis. Decision paralysis. The mod also has entirely new weapon types that were sorely missing in vanilla AC6. Snipers, for example, always felt like an odd exclusion, even with linear and burst rifles filling a similar niche. The mod brings sniper rifles back in a very interesting way. They only deal max damage at targets further than 500 meters away. This encourages the optimal strategy of corner camping from a distance so great, your target never gets a chance to see you committing war crimes. Just bringing back old weapons would be cool enough. But the Armory mod goes full Borderlands and includes multiple variants for every single weapon. These weapon variants adjust stats, add status effects, and dramatically increase the potential build variety. There's even boss weapons, which is super cool. The sheer number is a little overwhelming, but it's not that bad. When it comes to variants, the frame parts are much worse. Every single frame part has about 30 different variants. It's like walking through the closet of a privileged, rich, white woman. There's just so many. To be fair, you can sort by each variant specifically, but unless you painstakingly take the time to write down what every single variant does in a notepad outside the game, the sort feature really isn't very helpful. I'll leave my runic notes in the description or a pinned comment, in case you would like access to this information. Once you have a notebook of stat changes, finding the right frame part for your builds becomes a lot more doable. I wish I could say the same about interior parts. The number of generators, FCSs, and boosters is quite frankly fucking absurd. It's like the devs were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they never stopped to ask if they should. Again, if you use the sort feature, you can fairly easily find kind of the part you need, but the amount of redundancy on display cannot be ignored. When you're faced with 5 or 6 generators that show fewer differences than shades of white paint from Home Depot, it's hard to feel like you're making meaningful purchasing decisions. Okay, that's enough about the new parts. The Armory mod makes a ton of changes to the levels as well. Generally, the changes boil down to adding more enemies. More enemies also means you'll chew through your ammo and health way faster. Luckily, the devs also added more resupply stations. For me, these stations were placed the perfect distance from each other. I felt like I was constantly stumbling upon these things while on the brink of death. They always felt like an oasis in a desert of gunfire, coming to my aid in my most desperate times of need. Perhaps the most noticeable change in the Armory mod is how much faster everything is. Both the player and the enemies have gotten themselves addicted to crack, and it shows. Having everything move this fast is visually appealing and makes things fun enough to keep even a Fortnite Zoomer engaged. Faster combat also means you have less reaction time to make important decisions in the heat of the moment. More enemies combined with this dramatic increase in combat tempo makes this mod quite difficult. As someone who initially fell in love with the series in For Answer, the speed feels very good to me. I think playing this mod without first playing the base game would be a mistake, but as someone who's already S-ranked every vanilla mission, I welcome the more difficult and more interesting changes this mod brings. Overall, I love this mod. Mostly because it lets me ignore my problems and my mental blocks when it comes to enjoying media. But also because it's a lot of fun in its own right, with all of its different changes. If you're like me, and you feel like you just didn't get enough of Armored Core 6 the first time around, I highly recommend playing this. And if you've never played Armored Core 6 at all, absolutely buy it if this looks like your thing. I promise, this is one of the greatest and most well-polished games ever made. Another thing that's great and well-polished is my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, I'm desperate. At the very least, I'd really appreciate a like or a comment. Either way, thank you so much for watching this video. Please stay positive and have a wonderful day, everyone.